Is it? Yeah, we're 1 minute. I think we could start. Thank you for coming to this forum session. While preparing the event, I obviously came across the term sovereignty a couple of times, and as I had some personal issues with the term itself, I thought this might be a good idea to actually spark a community discussion. So therefore, I don't consider this as a talk. It's a forum session, and I hope it will be as interactive as possible. But maybe you allow me, say, 2 or 3 minutes of getting some context what I'm actually talking about here. So, as I said, I'm talking about sovereignty as a main topic, and this term is used by different stakeholders in different ways all the time. So there are sometimes people who refer to what I would like to call this a Schrems situation. Situation. So you probably all know what I'm talking about. It's about the GDPR, US-EU incompatibility and stuff like that. So if you store and process data in American data centers or in European data centers under American or Chinese or whatsoever legislation, then this is not compatible with the GDPR. But the question is, how can you avoid that? So obviously, one option to avoid that is to use OpenStack in the right way. That's why we are here probably all together. However, this is one way to look at this. And you probably remember organizations like Gaia X, who was, at least from my understanding, founded to address these issues. However, if you look for the member list of the Gaia X initiative, there are a lot of participants in OpenStack development and other open cloud activities, as well as the big players like Microsoft or Amazon and Google and so on. And how does this fit? I don't know. I'm not sure how alive is the whole idea of Gaia X anymore, but that's probably not the subject of today. But this plays a role in this overall situation. So what I see is that there are other companies who use this sovereignty term in a different way. Like this, different definition. So, for example, they say, okay, we build a new data center in, say, Frankfurt, Germany, or in Paris, or in Dublin, in Ireland, and then we do all this stuff European, and then we should be safe. Should we? this is something that I see with some kind of worry at the moment, because the term is used in such a different way. Why is it important for us as an OpenStack community? Because we rely a little bit on being able to provide technical features to address those issues as I described here. So if we put on here OpenStack, and obviously also several other tools and extensions based on open source and the like. That is also in some interaction here. What importance has sovereignty to projects like OpenStack? For these questions, we have already seen a couple of initiatives and activities. So, for example, I'm pleased to see Kurt over there as the founder of the, for example, SCS, Sovereign Cloud Stack, if I'm not mistaken, which is, please correct me if I explain it in the wrong way, specific configurations or a specific packaging of OpenStack and a couple of other tools as well to address this situation, address privacy concerns, address scalability concerns, etc., etc. So what I ask myself is, what is the relationship now between such initiatives, there are probably more than just SCS, and the classic OpenStack? Is it just some instance of it? Is there adding, do they add something genuinely new to it? Or how should we deal inside the OpenStack community with this term? I'm asking this because there is, or I talked to some people who said, okay, this is more or less the political layer. So this is about all those values and privacy and scalability, resilience, as we learned yesterday, things. And OpenStack is the technology. The NOVA project, the Keystone project, all our services, the code, and everything else that we contribute to this project. But has it also, is it necessary to have a discussion on those political subjects as well? And this is something I would like to discuss here a little bit with you and get some feedback so that I can clear my mind a little bit. There's already some...
I'm biased though, because I'm the chair.
Yeah, I hope we are all biased.
Forgive me. I think we're dealing with a situation where we have a vague word that can be overused. For example, cloud. Everyone thinks something different now, but we also think the same vagueness. Cloud is a nebulous information storage and retrieval system at this point that can be distributed or not, or can be localized. Now, when we talk about sovereignty, that's always going to be relative to whose sovereignty are you worrying about? Is it the organization? Is that organization multinational? Does it have to silo? And how does it silo? So I think on a technical level, we should drive discussion towards ensuring projects have controls and forethought into what are ways that we can enable operators of our software to leverage the such that they can easily meet some of their requirements in various configurations. That doesn't necessarily mean there is one solution to solve all things, but for example, I know of a financial services company that is based in the EU. I know they have a US arm. They operate their own infrastructure. They operate on OpenStack, actually. They may operate multiple islands. For them, they can meet their requirements, but their requirements and their implementation details are going to be different from Open Telecom Cloud or OVH or even a region of any cloud provider that stands up in infrastructure in the EU or elsewhere in the world. And so I think the important thing is to capture the key requirements and the needs for the OpenStack and other related projects so that they can understand on a technical level what are the things, the high-level knobs, controls, the requirements that can help enable and empower users of the software to be successful. Go ahead.
So, I mean, I'm the person that created and also led the Sovereign Cloud Stack project. So one of the things, as we have this sovereign thing in our name, is of course we had to make sure we define the term for the purpose of our project. And before we did that, we actually had a lot of conversations with users. And one of the first things that was very clear to us was to say, well, sovereignty is not something that a cloud provider has, but it's something that a cloud user has. So you need to take it from the user requirement and user need perspective. Otherwise, you're not having the right discussion. And we ended up with a taxonomy or a structure where we found like requirements out of 4 different areas. That was data sovereignty requirements at broad, and there's a lot of detail you can do there. There is the ability, that's the second thing, to switch between providers even after you have taken an initial decision, right? So that you have like some compatibility that makes it easy to do that, and a network of providers that maybe have the same standards. Third thing is technological sovereignty. So you have the ability to say, well, I can see the code, I can make proposals, I can do innovation, or permissionless innovation, I think was the nice term that Thierry was using to describe that ability to see the technology and to also contribute to it and change it to your needs. So that's the third area. And then the fourth area is really the operational capabilities, because operating a cloud can be very hard, and having a realistic option to say, well, if I need so much cloud and maybe so special cloud services that I want to operate it on my own, for my own company, I have a realistic ability to do so. And in order to have that, you need some insight into the operational processes to do that successfully. So sharing operational knowledge is part of what makes you operationally sovereign. So those were like the 4 areas, and we have published some papers on that actually a few years ago. And since then, I mean, we've been in many discussions. Most of the people discussing sovereignty, we could actually put their reasoning and their approaches into one of those 4 buckets. So sometimes some people cover more than one. Many people just discuss data sovereignty and forget all the rest. And then data sovereignty also includes like the legal aspect, like not only you have like physical control, but also legally there's no one intercepting with you. But that's still only data sovereignty. And the other ones, I think, are as important as the data one.
I think recent events in some providers that provide applications would show us that that is absolutely true, that we need to be mindful of those things, because if someone operates an entity inside in a country that is unfriendly or that has laws that supersede as they view it, or has enough pull, then they can get whatever they want, even if it violates other laws of other countries.
Even if it violates their own laws.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Over there, yeah.
Okay, so I'm a product manager for OpenStack security at Red Hat, and I say for me it's not sovereignty, it's sovereignties. It's death by a thousand cuts. You know, I have ITSR in India, you have something in the UK, you have something in France, now Spain has something, Italy, Romania, and everybody's coming with a framework, And I work more on the technology side of things. I need to make sure that the OpenStack can meet those requirements. But what is killing is the analysis of those frameworks. Because they're 80% the same and 20% different enough, just that And the question is always, can the product do it? Because the capability is there, or is there a gap that we need to work on upstream? Or can we configure it? Can we find a way around the problem using the vast partner ecosystem in OpenStack? But for me, it's really the amount of framework that I'm facing that is very difficult to manage, because it's just, it's death by 1,000 framework.
Yeah, indeed. I don't know who here in the room is aware of the interop working group. Oh.
Unfortunately. Would you like to go first?
So
when it still existed, I think it was very useful.
I will say I killed it for many reasons.
Because it was no longer useful.
It was being relied on as a crutch, and also as a mechanism where people were basically forging results. And which means if you lack enough interest to drive it, and people are forging your results, it's a useless program at that point.
yeah, I mean that's right, and I mean that's probably a problem that is not directly tied to sovereignty, but to general lack of resources or whatsoever. However, it showed me, so as I at least occasionally attended their meetings, showed me how difficult seemingly simple tasks can actually be. So I remember that we, for example, discussed names of flavor names or something like that. So what are the semantics of a flavor description string? Or should we put in some semantics in there? Or should we not do that? And if we do, how can it be structured and so on? So what does it actually mean to have an x, I don't know, c dot large dot 2x dash 5 or something like that? What does the dash 5 mean, or the x2 or so?
It boils down to how do we provide our users the decoder ring necessary to understand what the flavor means and what impact it has. And I think the same thing is sort of true towards what JP said, which is the frameworks. You have many of them, 80% similarity, 20% difference across the spectrum, and so you need some way to both understand and map to that and essentially decode it so that you can understand it.
And which will depend who is using OpenStack. As an OpenStack distribution provider, then we have to cover most of the world. If you're operating in just one country, then you just face one sovereignty, and then you might be responsible for all of the 4 players that are here on the board. Where obviously, if I manage to fit technology, then usually the operation and so on will be the responsibility of the implementer of our distribution. So it's always that the multi-dimension that makes it difficult to address.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. So as a user, to me, what you describe is more regulation. So if I am operating in different country, I have to obey to the regulation of that country.
Yes.
But sovereignty is, so to me, is more my choice. With my capacity to select, to choose what I want to protect or not, according to the situation in the different countries.
Yes.
There are some countries where, so in my case, Michelin, we are operating everywhere in the world. When I'm in the US, with my data center in the US, I have to, my sovereignty is concerning North America and the US, and I don't care about if, I don't know, I have a strange access from Americans to my data, because I'm in the US, I have to obey to everything. It's not the same. When I'm in France, I have to obey to the French rules, and I'm asking or requesting protection from French government. So it's I think sovereignty is more, to me, is what I want to get, and regulation is what I have to respect.
I agree that you can want something that goes beyond regulation, but in any country you're bound to the regulation, which will be the lowest bar you need to meet. You have to meet the regulation in each country, and sovereignty starts at the minimum you have to provide. In France, you have to protect, if you're under ANSI, then you have to protect a whole bunch of data. That's, you have to. After, if you want to do something different, it's, you might have your own rules because you have corporate rules that apply on top of that, and that is your own choice. But in each country, you just state it. You have to obey whatever the country is asking from you because that's the law. So which is why sovereignty for me is very tied to regulation and compliance because it's all mixed into one big bucket.
Yeah.
Just want to respond to what you said, that like the regulation sets the minimum bar. I think that is true in theory. The unfortunate thing we are seeing is that a lot of companies in Europe are using cloud providers from, for example, the US, and don't care about data protection rules, and the regulators actually don't enforce it right now. Because they are afraid if they would start enforcing it large scale, they would actually hurt the economy because those companies then would struggle to find like compliant European providers to get the services from. So we see actually there is regulation, and yes, you need to comply, but we see a lot of non-compliance which is currently not really enforced. And I think that is an issue as well, because I mean the rule of law kind of gets damaged if we allow that to happen on the long run.
I think that's a risk those companies are willing to take because so far there is no consequences. And you know that EU in general, when they decide to enforce compliance through monetary punishment, the punishments tend to be percentage of your revenues and not some flat fee, that is, it's going to be the cost of doing business, pretty much. Yeah, that's a risk, and that's a risk analysis. If you're willing to go there, up to you.
There is a, if for example I take a company in Europe having data at an American hyperscaler, okay, and if the data inside is not problematic data, nothing specific, so the regulation is not telling me anything. I can do it. It's normal, it's business. But sovereignty will maybe tell. If I think sovereignty, maybe I will ask myself, can I escape that contract? What if this hyperscaler is raising the cost at a non-acceptable level? Can I switch or can't I switch? And so this is to me the sovereignty I'm interested in. So it's not the regulation part, it's more my capacity or capability to exit something. So it was, yes, independence on technology. And this is where I think there is a room for OpenStack, or for open source, but also depending on how the OpenStack or the open source is operated, because it could be operated by a provider, which is also a provider that is obeying to an extraterritorial laws, or I don't know what.
Yeah, okay. So for me, still the big open question is, how should we, I hope we consider ourselves here as the community or as part of the community. I think this is all important for us, but how important is it also to enforce some kind of defined, regulated way of using these terms, so just to avoid misunderstandings. So if we are talking and say, so we want this sovereignty, and we work on OpenStack, for example, to achieve that, and then someone from AWS stands up and says, "No, we welcome into our data centers. We are on the same side. We provide the same thing," but they don't. How should we, as as an OpenStack or Open Infra community deal with this situation? Is it necessary for us to then stand up and say, please stop, you claim to be sovereign, or you claim to provide sovereignty to us, but you don't. At least you don't under a definition like this, or what I tried to describe here. And that is something that deeply puzzles me.
But why don't you take it from the other side? Just don't enforce something that you want to achieve, but enable it. So if we are talking about data sovereignty, as I can take my data somewhere else, why not enable that the movement of the data is more or less boundless? So you can just take it and go something else, and it just works, and you don't have to reformat anything and adapt your application to a new cloud provider that you're not switching to. Same for the independence of your operations. So why don't you enable that you can move your infrastructure from one cloud to another and don't care about what you have to do?
I think there's that, but I think what you're getting at is a need for a common taxonomy of words and definitions so that everyone's on the same basic page. But then I also think to go one step further is necessary to game theory it. And I will throw out two possible games we should play. What if the United States doesn't exist in 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
What if the US is in full civil war? I'm going to throw it out there. If anyone's aware of US politics right now, it's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about exit plan, I guess. So if you consider these 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions, first time I've seen interoperability, but usually data sovereignty defines in 3 dimensions. Data, full digital sovereignty. Data sovereignty, it's not about if you can move your data, right? It's about where your data is and who has access to this data.
Yes.
So with hyperscalers, can you guarantee that they don't have access to your data? They might say we don't, right? You might use encryption. But again, KMS service and keys, they are all in their cloud, right? So with hyperscalers, data sovereignty, let's say it's not applicable. Technology sovereignty, you don't own this, right? There is no exit plan for you to move to AWS or some others, or maybe OpenStack, it's exit plan, right? But if AWS, if the US doesn't exist, there are no big cloud providers, right?
Yeah.
So technological sovereignty also not applicable. Operational sovereignty, same thing, you do not operate this cloud, right? So if they decide to exit, they just exit. So with hyperscalers, it's hard to achieve any of this. Now with, let's say OpenStack, right? It's in your data centers, you can guarantee data sovereignty and residency. Technological sovereignty, it's open source, right? I don't know, you use Red Hat, Rozo, whatever, you can switch to vanilla, it's still OpenStack, right? Exit plan is very clear how you do that. Operational sovereignty, you operate this environment, right? It's your people, your resources, so you have full digital sovereignty, you can achieve this with OpenStack. So that's kind of takeaway, I would say. And then we are mixing compliance. I think they are connected, but not the same. So compliance, let's say GDPR. I don't know, there are some technical controls. For example, OpenStack doesn't support confidential computing today, right? We're not fully supporting confidential computing. And you need data encryption in use. That's something I think community can work on, right? Define what is missing from the technology perspective and start implementing this. So you can meet compliance in the US when you deploy your infrastructure there, because you deploy your OpenStack, right? You have expertise, you know where the data is. You deploy in the EU, right? You meet GDPR compliance. You have all the technical control to meet this, right? So that's, I think, where the OpenStack community needs to work on. Everything else, I think, is clear from the sovereignty perspective. You achieve this with open source. Am I missing something?
I mean, first of all, I fully agree with what you said. One of the things that we've been trying with this provider switching interoperability piece is to really say, well, we have like a great set of companies that operate their OpenStack clouds. And unfortunately, moving between them is not very easy because everybody sets it up in a different way, sometimes for good reasons and sometimes for no reason at all other than it was just the way they have to do it, right? And providing some commonalities actually would make the whole thing more efficient, because if you have some things you do in common, you share like the code, the implementation, the pain with more people, and you have more ability to solve them. And for your users, it's easier to move between them. So I think that's why we actually added that to our taxonomy, and I think it's useful.
And on top of that, there you are at interop again, at APIs and standardization of, okay, it's OpenStack, it's almost the same everywhere, but there's, well, maybe operational constraints which make them a little different. But if you can unify the APIs and therefore enable the action of the reality, real movement of your stack, your data, your parts of your data, parts of your compute maybe even. So we're talking APIs and get compatibility
It's not,
at the end of the day,
it's
right?
less API, it's more the content and the settings people use under the hood that get exposed via the APIs.
True, but if one solution is different from another solution, you can make them communicate to each other, capable to use each other.
Maybe a better way to look at it is, I want a way to package up and pull my data out cleanly, that is uniform across all deployments. And I want an import mechanism that's clean and uniform across all deployments. So I can take from one and load with the other consistently.
Yeah, but then again, with hyperscalers, they have switch off killers, right? Like tomorrow you don't have time to move your data. They just switch it off. That's it, right? It's not about ultimate sovereignty. It's about kind of what exit plan you have. But you are in danger, right? I mean, in general. Like if you have end-to-end control with OpenStack, or I don't know, you have your own stack that companies who build these clouds, right? And obviously these companies under some state jurisdiction, the state itself has this sovereignty because they control the companies, right? For smaller companies or smaller states, so OpenStack is, I mean, probably the only solution, I would say, right? To have full digital sovereignty. Then you can build on top of this, I don't know if something is missing, but the core technology, it's open source, it gives you lots of flexibilities. You can make resilient, highly scalable infrastructures. This is something community should work on, right? Just to enable states to build their own technology using and infrastructures using OpenStack.
Okay, I'll get back to that in a second. Code?
Yeah, I mean, maybe adding to what you say, it is risk management, right? You need to prepare for a situation where a single provider or maybe a complete country goes away, and then make sure you have a plan how to handle that. So I fully agree on that angle. When I talked about interoperability, compatibility between clouds, I mean, the vision was that you would not just have the ability to switch from one to the other without much trouble, but to actually have like a network of providers, and you can use multiple of them. You can federate them. So you actually have a network of providers that is your cloud provider, your virtual hyperscaler, if you want to use the term.
So
And that makes you very resilient.
On one provider, but you build the infrastructures for several of them, right? That's what you say, like with primary DR side, something like that.
Yes, as a user, you would basically say, well, there's like those 5 providers, they are highly compatible, we have networking between them, and I can use all 5 of them. I do some management pieces only once because I can federate them through user federation. And that's a very resilient setup. So risk management becomes a lot easier if that is the way you want to do
Especially
it.
these companies are providers under different jurisdictions, right? In terms of where, like, under what state control they are. True. And then, for example, for hyperscalers, we have like big ones like Azure, AWS, GCP. But what they started working on, for example, Google on GDCH stack, like you can deploy this stack air gap. You don't have switch of triggers, right? What you will stop receiving is like all the updates, new features, and so on. So you have time to actually move out, right? So that's another way. That's how they're trying to address this now.
Yeah.
Like for most critical infrastructures.
I want to comment on that quickly.
One second, that was a
Sorry.
mentioning.
Thank you. Earlier, before, I was joking with some colleagues that sovereignty is more like architecture, because OpenStack allows a lot of various architecture. And coming back to some terms that have been used for legislation like framework, which for me is very technical term. And about your questions, should sovereignty built in OpenStack? What's popped kind of around here, besides the definition of what is sovereignty regarding political, technological choice, etc. So, question is, could we put some ratings on an automated way inside OpenStack and the APIs?
So, sorry, automated what?
A rating of sovereignty regarding some specific data. So you export your Cinder or your Nova API, and they have built-in metadata that is some sovereignty rating that can be consumed by users that want some level of sovereignty for each domain.
So
That's kind of the question of being sovereignty being built inside OpenStack, but not too much breaking change for the project.
Well, you would have to have a rating framework, so you can even measure what kind of type of sovereignty
I
you can
missed the
achieve.
point. I missed the point where you said you killed some group of discussion or some project. Maybe it was about that.
The interoperability project,
Yeah.
which defined a set of Tempest tests that were to be executed against infrastructure in a cloud, and it had two faults. One, it was very opinionated to run in mainly the upstream CI. So when you went to run it downstream or in against a public cloud, you made slightly different choices. So you had to do a bunch of configuration and override defaults, and because it's all opinionated, it goes back to like flavor naming. For example, CERN has thousands of custom flavor names. They map it to resource classes. They map the resource classes to pool of machines that people can get allocated. And they do this to meet their operational requirements. But at the end of the day, because we gave so much flexibility in the development of all the APIs and the capabilities of the services, and we left room for vendors to do some value add and also extend onto their systems like storage vendors, we built a mishmash that doesn't test well between cloud providers. For example, we have hardware now that by default uses 4K block devices. What do VMs not use? 4K block devices. It gets translated by the base operating system, the hypervisor. The VM user doesn't know the difference. But if you tried to export that and use that same image, it's not going to work.
Yeah, you can probably not standardize everything.
Yeah.
So either it becomes useless or it is too much work. But isn't maybe the one task for the community to find the right balance of what should be generalized and or specified?
Well, I think it comes back to the requirements. What are the things people need to be sovereign or to be resilient? And is there a way or pattern that could be developed or engaged, or is it, oh, we meant you to name the structure this way and you're naming it this way, and you break this, this, and this by doing it this way? That could just be documentation at the end of the day. and maybe some warnings and logs, but the developers don't necessarily know that it's being used certain ways unless they get a bug report as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I want to comment on a few things I heard. One is, I mean, this idea on an OpenStack cloud kind of declaring its own level of sovereignty. I would go a step back. I think there's some discoverability things we could work on in OpenStack. Like when we talk about flavors, to take that infamous example, what properties do those flavors have is something that you need to read up a PDF, the documentation from your provider, to find out, because there's no way, except for the number of virtual CPUs, which you don't know what's behind it, and how much oversubscription there is and stuff, right? So there's some work we could do on discoverability. I think a sovereignty rating would be always something that somebody external that is neutral needs to do so you can have some trust in it. So there would be like a certification audit style process around that. That's not something you would just do by self-declaration, I guess. But the discoverability pieces, I think I would fully support if we can invest some good work there. Quick comment I wanted to make on the Google GCH. It was the
it was GCH, not GDC.
GDC. So we've had this discussion in Germany about this Delos company, which is running a Google Azure with own local operations. At least that's what they claim. And they were challenged whether they would have to shut down the services if Microsoft started to dislike it. And the answer was, well, we can run it for a few more months because, well, maybe we stop receiving security updates, but we will have a few months at least until it becomes too insecure. So that was the official answer from the executive from Delos. And I think he was rather more optimistic than pessimistic how long you would keep that running. And I think the question you need to ask yourself, is that enough time to migrate all the applications I have running there and all the data to a new place? And if the answer is yes, then maybe that's an acceptable choice for your company, right? If the answer is no, yeah, you better choose a different option then, right?
Or
Yeah,
architecture.
sure, but I don't think, I mean, you're talking about like Black Forest from Asia, probably a big cloud environment in Germany. It's a full-fledged Azure, like with 200 services, obviously running cloud of this environment without vendor support impossible, right? But GDC, it's like a really smaller flavor of Google Cloud, right? It's not even Google Cloud, it provides like 16 services, similar to OpenStack, but built on Kubernetes and probably with object storage integrated and everything, right? You can run it much longer. It's more like for critical workloads, air-gapped environments, not for multi-tenant business cloud, right?
So you have maybe more time, but
yeah, you have more time.
The question
You have a
remains the
year.
same, right?
It remains the same. It won't be an easy one, right? To migrate workloads from that environment, you need a lot more time without, or just to minimize the disruption. It's not just about data; it's about critical workloads that are in production. So.
yeah, well, yeah, if food distribution doesn't work anymore, that's rather critical, right?
So when you mention interoperability, so what I would say, this is the interoperability solution for not having technological sovereignty, right? Because you don't have your own stack, right? That's why interoperability is a solution of not having this stack, because you just manage the risk by using several providers at the same time. So it's not a dimension, I think, of sovereignty itself. It's a solution.
I disagree, because you don't want to force every organization to have their own cloud. I don't think that would be an efficient model to run this world. So to have some kind of work sharing and have people specialized in providing IT services
Sure, but
does
again,
make sense.
But this is a solution, right? I agree with you, right? But that's a solution for technological sovereignty. Yes, I cannot achieve this by myself. I'm too small. I don't know. There is no solution provided by the state itself, and so on. But I'm solving this by having interoperability, right? I'm using like different providers under different legislations and so on. So I manage this risk.
Comment down here?
So now in the conversation we have, maybe there is already an answer we can have is, so the question was, should we build sovereignty on top of the OpenStack? maybe the first part of the answer is, can we do it? So, is OpenStack ready? Of course, it has to be maybe configured and operated a certain way by certain people. Can we use OpenStack to reach that goal of sovereignty? So maybe it's the first. Do we have a conclusion on that among us?
Yeah, question to the round is that possible? Is possible the right?
I would suggest an effort that actually goes beyond this discussion in this room, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Even for just CAN?
What? Sorry?
Even for CAN? I'm not, because there is a difference between the should and the can. So can we do it with OpenStack? It's not the same as should we do it with OpenStack.
I think can and should are both answers that the group will have to self-determine. But what I think the group should do is sit down and collaborate on a white paper. To do the white paper, it would require to sit down and do some analysis on regional requirements. And I think by collaborating and creating that artifact, it then gives you the answer. And if it's very obvious you can't meet these requirements, or if there's a disconnect between different perceptions of the requirements, then that goes back to what is the requirement? Are we using the right words for the requirement? Do we need to define it, or are we looking at it wrong? Or are we looking at it right and the author was wrong? Who knows until we get into those details. And I think ultimately from a white paper standpoint, then it gives the community the ability to go, we've had this discussion, here's the outcome of our discussion.
So let me try to rephrase this. Create a right. Right. White paper to
So just
explain how to achieve that.
So to me, being real sovereignty, start owning my own data center, owning my own hypervisor, my own racks, my own switches, and maybe those switches has some not open source software within the switches, so it's a risk. It's a potential risk. So the key here is that what you mentioned before, no? Having a PDF where it's describing. So it's describing what really we have as a company, and the other side is our customers, the user has to trust on that. Because, okay, to me, the hypervisors is giving to me really trust that they are going to protect my data. Why not? Because the US, they set that free. So, again, this is States of the devil now. But the key is, who is guaranteed to me that an European company is not doing the same? So we need to, this white paper to me is to have those requirements that you repeat it many times, but you're right. So to try to certify some external companies certifying that you are accomplishing with the requirement. Like another certification, so we have. If we are not able to create those kind of certification, who is going to guarantee that really, as a user of a cloud, is going to be sovereign? Sovereign as in the terms of data, sovereignty, independence, technology, and operations. So it's the only way. If not, it's a matter of trusting of the company I'm contracting.
Well,
Who
I
are you?
want to
So
ask, I mean, if you write a comprehensive list of requirements that can be validated or this is not validated, I mean, that should be possible, right? So then it's basically a question on how to formulate that. So okay. So those are two proposals. That's feedback.
On the topic of tech sovereignty, I think there are two things that are a bit missing from the conversation, in my opinion. So for me, basically, tech sovereignty boils down to the question of, can we control it? Who does the tech choices of what I run, and can be sure that I can still operate it long term? And for me, the two questions that we haven't discussed is the one of governance and the one of balance. So basically, I'm not part of the Open Infra Foundation, and my question as an outsider that can choose between the technologies that I run is, what is the governance of the project, and can I trust it to do choices long term, and what would be my part if I integrate it with my small team in something that has extremely big actor already in it. So can I call it a sovereign tech if it's basically controlled by big US corporations, for instance, who do the technical choices in practice? So that's the first question. And the second question is, can I trust there is still an influx of talents from schools and universities that will be able to run, operate, and develop it with the right formations, basically?
It's a great question. And I think that's something that should also be in the white paper. But I think also it's a perception of risks and analysis. The plus side of open source is, one, you can't always fork it. And I think in our current state, what I've heard is that we actually had a growth in contributorship this last cycle. I think our first in many cycles, which is a positive sign. Does that mean there's a pipeline of new talent? I don't know. I think that we're at a fundamental, we have a fundamental challenge in front of us as a society, in that many people don't understand the lower layers of infrastructure and applications at this point. And so, as evidence why we, as a larger community, shrunk to a certain size, all the people that had their fingers in infrastructure, and we're growing a little bit. But yeah, we're still the core people that touch or have touched infrastructure. And so we need to spread those contexts. We need to reach a consensus on understanding. And if we can draft a white paper to raise the questions and try and answer them more to our best perceptions. And we might not even agree on some of those points, but having that dialogue is critical, and being on those and having those understandings, it helps you understand each other. Like, I have a coworker named Dimitri. For years, we did not agree on anything. Now we agree on most things, but we had to find the same words to go, here's why I'm thinking this. And now he understands why I'm thinking this. And so we don't need to use all the same words. In long term, we can go, here's my thought, here's my concern, and then he starts playing back the way I think and understand, and now he's able to understand me. And I think that's part of the problem with this entire subject, is the word is overused. The word is very vague, and because it's a vague, simple, complex concept, we need to disambiguate it. We need to explore the avenues, and that's not an easy task in itself. It's hard, but there's value in it. There's value in reaching that same consensus and understanding.
So,
and we might get requirements out of it.
No.
Oh, we need encryption in memory for Nova.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
So you saw the conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds that you are suggesting that a group is being created.
I think we should.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has value, and I think it can drive perception. Will everyone like it? No. That's normal. That's the challenge of open source, is getting people on the same page.
Yeah, for sure. So what I still ask myself, does it make sense to stick to the actual term, or is it just burned anyway, and maybe we have to come up with some different just some different term, I don't know, not sovereignty but awesomeness or something like this.
I heard many concepts of word that already exists actually for colleagues that were here. Mostly he talked about autonomy. Autonomy of working, doing job with any cloud provider. There were some talk about ownership, protection, data protection. So probably some point to discuss about that.
There might
It's
be
all those
levels as
layers.
well, right? So there might just be levels to sovereignty. In the past we thought like, okay, we are sovereign as the West, and that's okay. And now we are like, well, no, we should be sovereign as Europe. So that's a different layer. Maybe we should be sovereign as the Netherlands, where I'm from, and as France, where a lot of people are from. I hear others that are going a step further. No, as a user we need to be sovereign. And those are all great perspectives, I think, and one doesn't exclude the other. So if you write stuff down, you could maybe also layer it in these different levels. And maybe have another layer that talks about, like, okay, what about the hardware, what about the software, etc. And each company or each end user can find in this matrix a cell that fits that user best and get some kind of best practices out of it. I think it's not doable to have one definition of sovereignty. It will always be a layer.
And I think that's one of the key things is in words, explain it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's fine to have 6 definitions. It's fine to have 20 definitions.
Yeah.
As long as we understand these are different user stories, these are different perceptions,
Yeah, exactly.
and none of them are wrong.
As far as I remember, the Fraunhofer Institute just listed, they did this analysis a couple of years before, like 8 dimensions or 8 different interpretations of digital sovereignty. So
Yeah,
it's not a new dilemma.
Yeah. I was talking with Kurt yesterday on the last bus out, and he was saying the same basic thing. So I think that there's definitely value for this community to reach a consensus on these aspects and these perceptions. And if we generate requirements for projects, even better.
Even me working for a German governmental IT kinda, we are facing the sovereignty discussion all over the place, and you know, like in these very old 90s IT-driven IT companies in the public sector, people tend to not really understand what all this sovereignty discourse is about, and they are reaching for the wrong things. Like they understand if Microsoft promises to be a sovereign cloud provider in Europe, then everything is fine. No, it's not. So we have to discuss this on a daily basis, not the Microsoft thing, but all the other things, all over the map. So actually we are at the same point in our architecture department that we have to define and structure on a easy to understand base which kind of sovereignty can you tackle with that kind of solution. And they might be even contradicting each other. So a data sovereignty is maybe not the best if you want to have provider sovereignty or a quick provider sovereignty, because it takes time to move data. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and if you build a matrix, because we have to do that in our house now as well. It's a thing of the next months. But obviously that's an issue or a necessity to define all these terms all over the place in Europe and in the sovereign needing bodies all over everywhere.
Yeah, and
So
I would encourage in any discussion is to use the idea of what's the worst that could happen, and then play the mental game.
yeah.
I wrote a DR scenario once, and I actually called, in the US we have this organization called InfraGuard, and it is a mechanism to get in touch with federal agents and to gain context and share information. So I was like, what's the worst thing that could happen in my area? And he thought about it for a minute and said, there's a road by this power plant. Go take a look at it on Street View. This was right 6 months after Street View came out. And I looked, I had him on the phone, and I was looking around on that road. I was like, "You're joking. It's just that one dam." And he's like, "It's 6 feet tall, 6 feet thick." And I was like, I immediately knew what would happen if that water drained away and the ripple effect that would occur. And to me, my test was, how do we survive that disaster? And for everyone, it's going to be different.
So we are running a little bit out of time, and I'd like to close the speakers list. So here's mentioning. Did you just answer, or should I put you also on my mental list? Anyone else?
I'm copying you an email to the staff as well.
Yeah. Okay.
My comment is that at least in Europe, we have also a difficulty is that the European Commission has worked for a while on legislation about also sovereignty, and the problem is that it has been lobbied by many external companies, and the definition we have is almost useless, and it's causing trouble because our management is also using or trying to understand based on these definitions. Okay, so good reason more to be strong on the definitions of what we expect for sovereignty.
Yeah, indeed. That's a good closing word. If there's nothing else to add to that. So maybe the question is, how do we proceed?
We should identify volunteers, and someone should report contact details, and we should get an email going. It could potentially be on a mailing list, but I suspect not everyone is on, say, the discuss list. We can always just ask who's on the discuss list and send an email.
Special interview.
Sorry, what?
A special interview. Great.
We could possibly create one, yes.
Okay. So what is the easiest way?
Ideally, we would create a special interest group and use that to collaborate to write a white paper.
Okay.
Or a SIGAR working group. There, we can use the term interchangeably.
Does it make sense to define, I don't know, an Etherpad to just get this rolling?
Possibly, but I think someone has to take the lead and make the decision of what to call it, and start doing the outreach. If everyone, I'm on the mailing list. If those that are interested in the mailing list, I know you're on the mailing list, because I'm pretty sure you are.
Okay. I'm not 100% sure, but if you say so.
I have your email address. I don't know how. So I'm assuming yes, you might actually be.
Okay. Yeah, then let's do that. And
there's a whole other group of people talking about the same thing too right now. So I think the best thing to do is to start the discussion thread of starting a working group, or to say and drive towards something.
yeah, okay then.
We could also just all email our host for the session.
yeah. Well, we can do that.
Who is gonna get the emails? You?
No, him.
Him?
Volunteer him.
He's volunteer, right?
Yeah, well, let's see. Which one do I use for that? So for example, let's do for. It's a V. So if you're interested, send something there, and in a week or I will collect it, and then we can set up everything else that we want to do then, and see what is the best infrastructure for that, I guess. All right. So from my part, thanks a lot for the very good discussion and conversation. I'm surprised that so many actually found this room here in the last corner of the conference. I think it's an important topic, and it's worth further exploring. And with that said, thank you very much, and have a great conference.
I just have one more. The PTG is coming. I've heard many people expressing interest about confidential computing and encryption in VMs. So join, talk to the other people, because the support for TDX is very missing, and the support for MD should improve. So contributors, people interested, join.
Okay.
Because we need it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, with that said, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sent to you. That's okay.
Is that the email address you want
Yeah.
for you to keep an email with that?
Which one did you have? Okay, this might change.